Black Myth Wukong is an action game made by the Chinese producer Game Science. The Souls genre certainly influences it and definitely has a lot of core similarities, but what this team has crafted is not a Souls-like, but rather its own standalone title, not hiding in the shadow of From Software. It is an amazing game that has its own strong suits and was made with such quality that it is guaranteed to make an appearance at this year's Game Awards. This game scratched an itch that I have had for a long time and fills a role that I don't see many other games trying to do. So let's go ahead and dive into what makes this game so special. If you were to ask anyone who has played this game, what's it like, then I can strongly assume that the term boss rush would probably come up. This game features over 100 boss fights that were all created with such care, encountering creatively designed foes with diverse movesets, unique traits, and varying difficulty is this game's pride and joy. Yes, the areas this game takes place in are beautiful, the lore and story of Journey to the West incorporated flawlessly, but still, those elements take a huge backseat to the bosses created for this game. When people first heard of this boss rush type of gameplay where there was a new boss every 5, maybe 10 minutes, many grew wary of what that meant for the game as a whole. But me? I was thrilled. I'm a massive Souls fan, as you can tell from this channel, and each game is crafted with an amazing, immersive world with so many elements that I could get lost in each for months. But what makes these games so special to me was not only the worlds, lore, and characters, but the bosses. When someone says Souls games, most people think hard bosses, and so when I heard of a game that is not necessarily a Souls-like, but is one with polished, clean, satisfying combat that has a similar difficulty to From Software, and the game's focus would be on providing this many quality bosses, I was thrilled. Also, we have seen in the past with games like Elden Ring that often when a game has this many bosses, the overall quality of them can suffer. This leads to repeat fights, lazy design, and overall just less impressive. This is completely understandable for a game as massive as Elden Ring, as it just offers so much and most of the fights are still amazing, just with some stragglers left behind. But in Wukong, they don't take on this massive open world project and clearly show their intentions to craft a flawless roster of fights. Like I say in most of my videos, the bosses are almost nothing if not accompanied by an equally good combat system, and boy does this game deliver. Similar to Sekiro, you pretty much use one weapon the whole game. You're given many staffs to choose from and some have unique properties or movesets, but for the most part they all play the same. This gets rid of the potential jankiness that this game could have due to only needing to perfect the combat with one type of weapon. The combat might get old if you were to use the same weapon all game, so luckily they added 3 different stances that can be switched on the fly and each have their own skill trees offering new combos and effects. You have a dodge with potential for a perfect dodge that has such a crisp noise cue when you hit it. At first glance, many will be disappointed at the lack of a parry option, but wait, there is one with spells. You have many options to choose from, allowing you to have 4 equipped at a time that can allow you to parry, freeze time, go invisible, dodge, revive, or even summon a literal army. There are not as many as other action game titles, but this is okay because not many games have come to the same level of polish that these spells and combat have. You don't have infinite customization, but enough to warrant multiple playthroughs without ever becoming bored. Now, there are actually 2 forms of customization that do have a ton of variety, and those are the transformation spells and the spirits. There are 10 total transformation spells, which just flat out transform you into a completely new character, giving you a new moveset, dodges, and skills. Each one is unique and offers their own advantages. Some you get from beating a boss, others from questlines, but all are fun in their own right. Spirits, on the other hand, are momentary transformations that mostly just allow you to use a unique attack or debuff and then immediately go back to your original form. Because they are so short, there are a lot more of them than the spell transformations, allowing you to pick from 54 total. So, between your weapon, armor, items, spells, spirits, and transformations, I think it's fair enough to say there's more than enough customization in this game. This title takes place over 6 chapters, all with their own designs, as well as even more secret areas. Each chapter has its own lore and story tied to it, and honestly, each could be their own game if split up. This game is pretty. The use of light, shadows, and colors really helps bring the whole experience together and makes running around much more enjoyable. Each level is mostly linear, but has many side paths taking you to quests, side bosses, or even new areas completely. My biggest compliment is that these areas never try to be something they're not. They serve the purpose of tying the story, enemies, and bosses together and know their place. I've seen it too many times in other games where developers get too greedy and try to go for a little bit of everything, and this leads to an overall lacking experience. Black Myth Wukong knows its strengths, bosses, and story. Then it creates a world to support that, and by not being overly ambitious with it, they are still able to craft a beautiful landscape to traverse. Alright, now I'm going to touch on an aspect I didn't like so much. This game features questlines as well as side stories that can give you rewards or even access to a whole new level. I love this, I just did not like the way they went about it. In my opinion, the way of figuring out where to go next in a questline was never straightforward. Trust me, I am familiar with cryptic stories and questlines through my love for From Software, but in their case they have a deep and mysterious lore that you get glimpses into through random items, weapons, and remembrances. They use that sense of confusion they give the player to their advantage. In Wukong, however, they go a similar approach but lack all of the setup that From Software used to make that experience enjoyable. Now, some quests and areas are easier to figure out than others, but some, especially trying to get to Erlang, are harder than others. In this case, you need to have done very specific tasks, and even one small mistake or place forgotten and you are in for a headache unless you use the trusty old internet. So I'm not saying I hate cryptic questlines and secrets, I'm just saying that there's a way to go about it that makes it more enjoyable for the player, and in Wukong's case, I think being more clear would have significantly benefited the players and would have led them to these beautiful hidden areas with honestly some of the best bosses this game has to offer. I'm very happy to see the direction that Wukong took as a game, as it's much more influenced by From Software in the Souls games than other action games, while still defining itself as a separate category. It used the classic hard boss fights, dodge roll, checkpoints, and more to create something new, whereas other titles such as Lies of P, Steel Rising, and Anotria take the formula one for one and are then placed into the category of Souls-like. I love a good Souls-like, but trying to copy From Software that closely while making your own game interesting and feel good, all while having a smaller budget, is an extremely difficult task. Yes, some can do it, but others end up falling behind and becoming forgotten, only to live in another game's shadow. Black Myth Wukong wanted to not be placed under that shadow. They follow select few parts of that formula and instead made a game with such high quality and effort that it will never be known for what aspects it shares, but rather what it brings to the table. This is a direction I wish more games would take. We have our Souls-likes, and I love them, and we also have our classic action-adventure games, but that space in between is what I often see to be lacking. Black Myth Wukong solidified its space in that area, and I hope more games follow suit in the future, giving us a nice balance of more of an evolution of games that build on From Software's greatness, rather than just trying to replicate it. Thank you all for letting me ramble on at the screen about a game I love. There is much more I could talk about, and much more I am sure you guys found amazing or frustrating, and if you don't mind, leave a comment, as I'd love to hear about your experience with the game. My next video will be about Anotria, the last song, that Italian Souls-like that came out earlier, so if that sounds interesting, stick around. With that, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and until next time.